Welcome to the premiere episode of the Community Media Podcast. I'm Erich Archer. I'm the Executive Director of Ep1 Television in Gloucester, representing Gloucester, Rockport, Manchester, and Essex. And I'm here with our first guest, Chris Sicuranza, the Director of Communications and Constituent Services, whatever that is.
Yeah, it's a very long title. Hi.
Excited that Chris is here as our first guest. First question to you, Chris. What does your title mean?
Boy, it's a mouthful. So I was lucky enough to have the chance to work with the mayor on her campaign a couple of years back. And she called me up right before I joined the team at the beginning of last year and said, you know, we're trying to make sure we have the right vision going forward here as we're talking long term. And I said, well, I'm eager to help. What do you envision? And she was talking about constituent services, about the front-facing needs, because so much of what we do in the mayor's office is, of course, emblematic of everything across the city. The departments are different relationships, and keeping up with that and communicating around that as well too. So those are the two kind of major words that I took out of the conversation that I had with her about what her hopes were for a future reorganizational plan. So the mayor's office, when I came on board, I took over the executive assistant role technically, and we put forward a plan from our HR department and our department to say, look, this is a need to modernize the mayor's office. So we presented a reorganizational plan. The city council approved it. They saw the work that I was doing with the mayor, and they recognized the need that communications, constituent services, these are all very valuable things that we all agree with as part of our community, and what we want to stand for as our values and how we can get stuff done by working together. So they more or less said to me, what are the major things you want to work on? And I said communications and constituent services. So that's where I ended up. So.
Well, I want to come back to that. I want to come back to how you got there and obviously talk a lot about your plans going forward.
Yeah.
But I just want to kind of touch on why I thought a podcast like this would be useful in the first place.
Yeah.
We, Ep1 Television, we're going through a rebranding process right now. We're at a really interesting kind of inflection point for the organization. We just renewed a new 10-year contract with Comcast, as you know. I think our value is changing. And outside of us, I think that every business, nonprofit, municipality, they're all media companies to some degree now.
Absolutely.
And so I have a lot of conversations with business owners and business leaders and community leaders, and everyone's kind of facing the same challenges or similar challenges. So I thought it would be worthwhile to talk with people like yourself who have a hand in media and content creation and awareness spreading and messaging and those sorts of things, and talk about some of those challenges and what's working, best practices, what's not working,
sure.
what haven't we figured out yet, and how can we work together, and some of those sorts of things.
And keeping it scalable too, especially on a more local or regional side of stuff too, right?
Right.
For me, some of my background, I did corporate communications. I was a PR manager for Monster Worldwide prior to joining the mayor's office. I helped represent different pharmaceutical companies as a contractor, again, as a different PR practitioner. So corporate communications and understanding what a brand is trying to communicate, what they are offering as solutions, how people perceive them, and how we can influence that kind of outlook is largely when people hear PR, they're always like, what did you spin? What are you lying about now? And I always say, that's for the lawyers. Let them figure out how to say the right smooth thing. Our job is to celebrate the best of what we can be and where we should be. And I kind of apply that to a lot of the things that I do within my work. And so I say everyone and everything is now a brand.
Mm-hmm.
The mayor's page is a brand on Facebook. Gloucester Daily Time is a brand. Ep1 TV is a brand. And if you're not thinking about how you're being perceived as a brand, also as an individual, which could be considered a brand, then I don't believe you're necessarily going to be as successful as you could be and as you should be, really. And so the things that are happening here, the things that are really important for me to see as an evolution have to happen at a place like this first, where you can have those community conversations through people who can help guide all the the right people, the right stakeholders into the mix and guide them out to a more unified and realized goal. So first and foremost, thank you, Mr. Erich Archer, because I believe a big part of what you're doing is doing just that, bringing the right people to the table, especially with the local media summits. I think those are great. So, I want to thank you as well, too, because I think a big part of where I'm going to see future success is largely because of where I'm sitting right now. So,
oh, come on.
Well, I'm communications, so I mean, I have a certain angle on that, of course.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie,
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Well, I think we can swing back around to the local media summit. I think that's an interesting thing. We should talk about that. I'm interested first, though. You mentioned your sort of corporate background. What was it like making the jump into the municipality world?
So it was tough because prior to being an official public employee, where I serve at the pleasure of the mayor 24/7 and being on call for anything and everything, you kind of realize how the private sector and, the educational sector and, I was also an entrepreneur. I had a brand called Go Out Loud down in Salem. You have to showcase results in a way that you can be accountable and showcase what you're doing in a more, daily, weekly, whatever measurable process. You have a certain understanding about what's at stake within your role and your job because, you're an at-will employee. You could be terminated. You could, there's all these fears that you have in the private side where, especially if you're working for a larger scale company, I think they have the resources and the talent, the ability to navigate a lot of problems that otherwise, as I'm seeing it from the public lens, there might be union issues, there might be nuances there that I wasn't quite aware of. In terms of timeliness, I have a very high standard in my own self about my own values of what I think are should be achieved at whatever time. And again, that's expectation management. So I've been lucky to work with a lot of talented people. I'm still lucky to say that, but adjusting the scope of what is the private side versus the public side. The biggest takeaway for me right off the bat is on the private side, somehow it seems like things get done typically faster, but not necessarily with more efficiency, perhaps. There's not a lot of good conversations about why you're doing that. Some managers just told you to do it and you do it. So there's a timeliness, I guess you could say. Whereas on the public side, things are designed on purpose to be slowed down. And that took a while for me to digest because I'm not used to slowing down. I'm used to doing things well and on time and making sure that even if there was mistakes along the way that we could fix that later. It's more so the gears of government are designed to work slowly because you want to make sure you do have that public input or that somebody has the chance to learn about it and chime in after the fact. So, it's a different beast for the very reason of who it's designed to serve. You're not designed to serve a stakeholder, a shareholder, a for-profit thing, rushing something out. You're designed to be there to be accountable and presentable and honorable to the role that you're in. And that takes a dial to be adjusted in your head a little bit of just about, again, I say that for real. I serve at the pleasure of the mayor, but I serve at the pleasure of every citizen in Gloucester. And I take that responsibility very seriously because I would want the same to be returned to me in any other environment. So anybody walking through our door, I'm going to listen to, and I want to give them the best service that I can possibly afford them and take the time to do it right and not rush to something just to get them done and to the done box. So,
well, that's interesting to me because, you mentioned how important it is to get this community feedback. And here you are, the Director of Communications. That's a really interesting role. And also the idea that your demographic is the entire city.
Right.
When we think about demographics here, we have a pretty wide demographic as well.
Sure.
Right? We have programming for seniors. We have high school sports.
Yep.
We've got kids stuff at the middle school. So we have a really wide demographic too. You might be one of the few groups that has an even wider demographic. Literally every citizen.
Yeah.
How do you manage communications when that's the case? I mean, you must have to be on every platform in every way.
Right. And we were talking about this a little bit before we started, was around how do you support things for the long term too, and make sure you're not just trying things willy-nilly and still having an authentic and genuine brand voice that people can trust, right? So if you're going out there and you're playing with Snapchat and you try it a few times and you take whatever City of Gloucester screen name, and then you're not doing anything with it, like that doesn't make you look great either, right?
Yeah.
So you have to have some sort of focus. So the first thing that I kind of did was understand, well, what are we using right now? Like where are we successful? Let's talk about why that's successful and understand the data around that a little bit more so we can better have a strategy on, focusing on those wins and is it the time of day? Is it a certain type of content being posted? But we got more into Twitter. We got more into Instagram, limited to Snapchat, but we do have different WordPress affiliate relationships with as well. We have more brands now than ever, and I think that's the toughest thing for me, to be honest with you, is so we have Gloucester Green, which Matt Coogan and I were here not too long ago to talk about the initiatives around that. But again, that's like its own brand, which has its own website, which has its own. Yeah. So there hasn't been a clear-cut strategy for many municipalities or brands. And that's one of the biggest things that I feel like I have to tackle. So even still, I'm still creating social media policies with our HR department to make sure that, first of all, that people have their First Amendment rights, that they can have the freedom to say what they want as an individual. But if you're representing the city as an official page or brand, then we have certain expectations about what you can say, what you can share, and how you can deliver a message. So, that takes time to audit who's doing what and why and how are they using those tools. But, the bread and butter for us is still, in terms of a social network, is Facebook far and away. The mayor has an unbelievable page that has really good traction with two-way conversations happening at any given time. And you do hear anything and everything. I have a nice profanity filter on there that catches a lot. I'm learning a lot of new languages up here too as a result of that. But but in all seriousness, you have to take that feedback as an opportunity to learn where you think that it's appropriate and where it's insightful and helpful. Sometimes people just want to be nasty just to be nasty. I mean,
is it helpful to the process? Do you think it makes government better to have this kind of instant social feedback?
Yes. And I think it's because right now we have a lack of transparency, a lack of accountability with people who we feel are too distant from us right now. So if you said, I don't care if you're talking about the past president or this one, if you said, I want to talk to the president, you kind of have an understanding that if you tweeted them, you're probably not talking to them to begin with. You're probably talking to like an intern or something, right? Like, then again, I don't know if I should be speaking about the current one or not. So I don't know if he's directly tweeting. It sounds like maybe he is, but I'll sidestep that conversation entirely. All that is to say,
it'll be interesting if he's not.
You almost hope that he is, actually, as I'm saying that out loud, right? So,
that'd be crazy if he wasn't.
But the mayor has kind of her own, approach in that way, in that she and I largely tag team that, and we know kind of the brand voice or how, and I know kind of how she might answer a question, and then I can sync up with her in a way that, okay, do you want to answer this person as it's coming in, whatever else. And Facebook, as a result of us having such an active page, constantly is giving us the opportunity to try things in a beta approach. So, for instance, one of the things that we accepted early on that I don't think has been rolled out, because I manage other Facebook pages, I haven't seen it there, is we have an advanced inbox. So we could say, to do for later, follow up, add notes to a person as it's hitting our account, have automated bot messaging, send a note to Chris Sicuranza because this is off hours. So we can do more with less, and we can give people the opportunity to be more informed on their time. So that's not something that people are used to. Mm-hmm. They're not used to somebody writing to the mayor and having somebody respond back on her behalf, or having it be her herself saying, yes, this is when the beaches are open. This is the information you're looking for. Here's the link that I can provide to you, etc. People are surprised by it, but they're surprised, delighted, and then telling others, and they're taking advantage of that too. The problem that I'm having now is keeping that high standard going forward as the volume is only going up.
Yeah, as more and more people get aware. I mean, it does seem like a major value add. How much time are you spending on social alone?
That's a really good question, and I should probably audit that in a more official capacity. It's never as consistent as I would like it to be, but I would say, because we're getting messages morning, noon, and night on especially Twitter and Facebook, And then we also have online submission forms, which are like automated reports that are sent through the website to us for contact. I would say at least 20 hours of my week is dedicated to just being on social and handling around that. So at least, I would say if not more, it has to be more. Amazing. And that's usually when I have the extra time during the day to appropriately comment back or whatever else. Mm-hmm. So, it's tough, and it's becoming tougher because of our success.
So interesting to me how uncharted the territory is from a organizational level. When you're at home as an individual, you're not thinking about Instagram strategy or policy around Facebook.
Right.
But, you need to be developing all these things. That's kind of crazy.
And if you're not having those conversations, who is determining what the content should be? So at the very least, you need to have these kinds of conversations around who you are, what you stand for, what kind of content you would like to see, what your approaches are. So for instance, like we have a social media archiving tool that James Pope, our IT director, puts into our pages. So it's become something that you could have as a freedom of information request, a public records request. Mm-hmm. So we never delete any comments. We can hide them based off of that profanity filter, but we can't delete things, and we don't. And so it's tough when you see something kind of like nasty or negative on there under something that's really a great piece and somebody who has something nasty to say just because. It's like you just have to look at that every day and you're like, I wish I could just get rid of that. So, but again, I guess for me, I see that as an opportunity for better conversations and more enlightenment, especially with some of our department leaders who sometimes say, I don't feel like our department gets enough attention and we're doing this, this, and this. Well, have you considered trying to make more social-friendly content? Have you tried tweeting out a photo lately? So I'm having those conversations more and more. Unfortunately for me last year when I came on board, there was a lot of transitioning going on. There was a lot of media attention on the city last year. Mm-hmm. So I was really wearing the kind of the crisis communications hat more than the strategy hat. So as we're talking about those values of the city and the city council and the races, it's great to have these conversations now because we're talking about a lot of these things that are going to have serious consequences, and I mean that in a positive way for the long term. So I see it as a welcome opportunity to make progress.
Well, it's exactly these kinds of things that made me think that a podcast like this would be a good idea, because these are the kinds of conversations I have all the time with different groups.
Right.
And it's like, we're trying this for the first time, or we know we need to, and we don't know how to do it, and more often than not, it's like, we know we have to do it. We don't want to do it. We don't have the time to do it.
And it's tough. When do you dive in? When is the right time to take that chance? And you can strategize and you can talk about all the policies that you want, but at some point you're going to have to do and be okay with doing. And I think that's largely the artistic creative process anyways, that's the difference supposedly between a true creative artist as a professional versus an amateur is they go out there and they put their talent, their art to the public, and they accept whatever that input is going to be. Whereas the amateur maybe doesn't necessarily do that. They don't go to the art gallery. They don't do the stand-up comedy in front of everyone. Mm-hmm. That's where I feel like where the rubber meets the road of sorts. So, there's some courage there. There absolutely is. And as you said earlier, there's a little bit of like Wild West quality here because, it wasn't that long ago that people said, oh, Facebook going public, they're going to just tank now. I'm going to bet on MySpace coming back again because Justin Timberlake's jumping back in. Like, you don't quite know where everything is going to end up. So, I mean, Snapchat, people were really thinking they were going to take off when they went public. They're worth less than Twitter at the moment. I mean, who knows how everything will shake out. So that's why if you decide what your brand values are and what you're trying to message as opposed to working on the platforms more individually, I think that's a more rewarding experience. But, it's always fun to see what the newest app or gadget or how can I distort my face and how can I, how do I make this a message that the city of Gloucester is innovative but fun and, you always have to make sure that you're you're bringing it back to that core message, I guess, too. So
yeah,
a cat face on Snapchat, is that really helping the
we're
citizens?
We're not so interested in that. I feel like we're getting a pretty good handle on tapping those social platforms for getting the message out, and now it's kind of a focus on producing content directly for them. I feel like that's sort of the next stage, and to use your word, getting a little more courageous about that. I think this podcast and others that we're working on and other video projects have to do with that, have to do with sort of, pulling back the curtain, being a little more transparent about the process at work around here.
Yep.
And, because that's who we are now. We're an organization in transition, and so being sort of out there about that and generating a lot of social content that way. Do you guys generate a lot of content with social in mind, or is it really just piggybacking on where you guys are and what you're up to these days? And
I think it's more so the latter, and it's because largely so much of what we do is visual. So much of what we do is almost automatically kind of a photo with the story with that, right? So the governor came in today. Charlie Baker is vacationing in Cape Ann, and he came in today in his vacation garb before we shut down for the day. And he was there to pick up we have a new City of Gloucester flag that he's going to hang in the State House for us. And he's just kind of shooting the breeze, but of course we take a photo and we put that and we tag it and everything else. Now you can't quite try to have a whole frame of a conversation of a blurb there if you don't know what the photo is going to look like. If he doesn't show up, you can't have content ready to be scheduled to be pushing out if he's not even showing up. So there's a lot of randomness that you have to kind of calculate as part of it. But again, I also know that there's a certain mayoral voice that she might use to talk about certain things. So there's almost an internal, in my own head anyways, brand guideline. What I have to do a better job of is exploring that, writing that down, having other people buy into that as well too, not just on behalf of the mayor, but on behalf of the city as their brand, and what does that stand for. So, and to your earlier point about, opening it up, so many people thought when I helped the mayor on her campaign a few years back that it was incredible that this social media presence that she had, that this engagement, that it was so coordinated and branded. And, these weren't necessarily revolutionary ideas per se, but it took conversations of a team of people to say, okay, I'll work on this on Instagram to post this at this time and talk about what we were actually going to do and have people own it, but also having the right brands share that content. Hey, you were in the photo with the mayor. Is it okay if we tag you in this? So then other companies and brands were like, wow, I got good engagement from that. It's actually a good thing to have her tagged in us with this. And, people were really worried about, oh, I don't want to get too political or whatever. Like, you have to have some courage to tag someone, even though I think you should be able to friend anyone and tag anyone, whatever. But that's a different conversation. I just think that so much of what we do is certainly in the moment, celebrating that moment and putting it out there in a way that we can all find acceptable. But yeah, take that chance and tag someone and make sure that you're following up, because it leads to connections that you didn't quite realize, which is why even like the local media summits that you've been doing here, bringing in different stakeholders across the community that represent our youth, our seniors, the educational institutions. If we're not talking to each other about what we're all working on, what we're doing, how we're harnessing these tools, how we're evolving the message, the branded tools, how are you going to do it? How am I going to do it? How can I tag you? You have to have those kinds of moments in central place to bring everyone into. And that's why, I applaud what's going on here, because if you're not having that, then you're not really expanding anyone's horizons. You're going to just be stagnant. So this is, in my mind, a lot of progress that we all have to kind of swallow and figure out. But we have so many great examples in the community as well, too, to look towards it. And I'm really excited because we have nowhere to go but up, frankly. So
yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, the reason why I thought it would be a good idea to get. So I guess we should back up and explain what the local media summit
Sure, yeah, since we keep talking about
we keep talking about that.
You're not invited, people.
Yeah. So what was that, last month? I pulled together about 20 or so local leaders.
Yep.
people who are just, have a hand in media in some respect.
Right.
And just kind of a brainstorming session. Part of it was a feedback session for us as we rebrand, kind of what organizations want and need. What's the sort of collective picture of the future?
Right.
How can we collaborate? Where are the opportunities? Those sorts of things. Just get all these community stakeholders together for a group conversation. And I think it was
how did you, I'm going to put you on the spot. How did you decide whom to invite to that? Because, if you're saying a media summit, right?
Yeah.
The easy, obvious thing to do is like you invite members of the traditional media into the mix.
Some were there, right? I mean,
yeah, but but there was also people there I wasn't necessarily expecting.
Should we name names? Probably not.
But okay, but they were voices who represented, again, like seniors, the youth, students, right?
Sure.
Really fascinating from their lens how their world is shaped from media or how they interpret what's going on, and radically different than just to put everyone at that table. So
yeah, I mean, I guess it was just a look at community stakeholders in general and how do we make sure that the widest swath of people was heard from and represented. So, we talked about earlier about our demographic.
Right.
We've got to have seniors represented. We've
Right.
got to have kids represented. All the local businesses, if we can, the municipalities. And so I guess it was sort of a cast a wide net kind of a thing. And
Smart.
who are the leaders in those spaces that hopefully have some knowledge of media, social media, video, content creation, those sorts of things that can add to the conversation.
yeah.
So, our representative of the students was Jessica Linquata, because she's teaching a video course at the middle school, and she's gotten green screen certified. And so, it wasn't necessarily like the principal. It was who's like
the appropriate person.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So it was that sort of that approach. And I think that made for a good conversation because everyone had sort of some idea of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of how it came together. I don't want anyone to feel like they were left out. If you'd like to come to the next local media summit, you're more than welcome. So I mean, it was a great event, and I think the feedback was solid that kind of thing needed to happen to get those people in the same room. And so now it's a question of trying to have a valuable follow-up. Having a brainstorm session is relatively easy. You don't need much of an agenda. It's like, let's
making it happen.
See if yeah. So now it's a taller order. Now it's like, is there a cool keynote speaker that would make sense?
Yeah.
Or what are the deliverables now? What are the action items now? It becomes a little more real. So that's the challenge. The next one's on September 12th.
I can't wait.
Yeah. I'm a little nervous because it's not all come together yet, but we'll figure it out. But in general, the feedback was good. So,
well, again, I'm so fascinated about those kinds of conversations because I think one thing I can say, so I've been in that role for over a year now. I guess a year and a half. So I've kind of seen, even in the short time that I've been as an official public employee, but I've managed various campaigns as a private contractor for many years now across the Northeast of Massachusetts, so Merrimack Valley and Essex County primarily. I saw something kind of change in the last couple of years or so, 2 or 3 years, where I just think people are more... They feel a certain freedom to say whatever they want.
Really?
And the thing that I feel like is really lacking is a fundamental mutual respect, where people, they want things to be up or down, black or white, yes or no, and they want it to be this team versus that team, us versus them. And I think, like most things in life, the truth is somewhere in the middle, and we have an obligation to hear every voice, but we don't have an obligation to be nasty. We don't have an obligation to be aggressive. We don't want to necessarily have those be those values that we rally behind. And so I think in today's political environment, it's very easy to get swept up into a conversation around something charged, something very divisive. And that's where I appreciate the gears of government perhaps moving a little bit more slowly by design, because it gives it the right attention at the right time and lets everything kind of breathe a little before, is this really something that we need to tackle right now, whatever this conversation is. And, I always try to encourage people to think, well, how does this affect you in your house in Gloucester? Does this national story have anything to do with you? So why is this the only thing that you can talk about? You have to challenge people to come to the table in a way that they can both mutually benefit, not mutually destruct. And like I said earlier, I saw something kind of creep in, and I don't know if it's a result of just the political exhaustion. I think there's a lot of that. There's a lot of fatigue. There's also dwindling numbers across a meaningful citizenship that can stay involved. We have so many boards and commissions even here in Gloucester. How do you have a healthy volunteer board of whatever function? And you're not paying these people, and you're asking them to come to these meetings and many meetings and to work on this project. And that's really a labor of love. You have to find people who can afford that time off, who are experts in the space. And, in the private sector, you're paying a lot of money to a contractor to do that. So it's not easy at all to find the right people that can kind of fit into that style and get how to be mutually beneficial. And so I think there's a lot of aggravation and frustration where things don't get done. I think there's again, we have to find ways to involve people better. And I do think that's why I'm so excited about communications and constituent services, is because that it does live in harmony in my mind. And if we don't start fixing how we talk to one another, or start saying what's appropriate and what's not, and what's respectful and what's helpful, then I really fear that we're not going to have people who want to register to vote. And I know that sounds kind of egregious unto itself because, we have a healthy democracy, this and that. We have to always have that be our own accountability as to why we have pride to do that. If we're not making it any easier for someone to get involved with the city by modernizing or providing a tool to which they can stream live, as opposed to coming into a city council meeting where it's a hot summer day in a non-air conditioned auditorium, you could understand why a person with 3 kids who's maybe working 2 jobs doesn't have the time or the luxury to know every last thing the council is doing. So I think there's something to that. And I think, as I've seen the history of kind of the malaise / the over-emotional characters that seem to be growing, I worry about the everyday people who might not want to put up with that and their population dwindling, which makes the efforts we're doing here really important. Because, again, if I could have city council streaming, and if I could have a city council member potentially digitally be there because they were traveling themselves, and then therefore this vote could pass, why not? Why shouldn't we be pursuing that? So in a weird way, like this is these kinds of tools, I feel like, are going to be what helps liberate us or remind us that when we invest into these tools locally, when we work together across stakeholders, we can affect so much more positive change. And if we work locally, never mind what's going on in the state or federal, we can be the model to which other communities hold us up and say, that's how they get it done. They have a local C-SPAN. We have the ability to do things unlike other places, and I'm really excited about that.
Well, that's kind of the feedback we were trying to get, and that's going to help us figure out how to help the city, how to help the citizens, how to help the businesses. Where do we need to be? What kinds of services do we need to be able to provide to be able to reach people where they expect to be reached, the way they want to be reached, to sort of foster communication and continue to be this forum for communication at the local level, with technology changing so rapidly, and populations changing, and everything that's changing around here. I'm curious how the digital natives will deal with the pace of government you were mentioning.
Well, but you know what? That's a really good point, and you see it on the council right now. You have a young city councilor, Joe Orlando. He's around our age, and as he looked at the budget, he's a more fiscal conservative. He was trying to have a lens of, well, can we digitize the service? Can we, as opposed to doing a mailing, can we potentially get everyone's email address as a central repository to send information? Great idea in theory. In execution, how many seniors have an email address? How many of our citizens actually have email addresses? How do we know that it's actually them? How do you begin to verify that? Nobody has really answered those questions, not and that's not really Gloucester's obligation to answer exclusively either, by the way. So how do you have authenticity in an anonymous space, especially with something as easy as it is to sign up for an email address? You know an address here in town, you know maybe who lives there, and that there's a certain, validation there that happens as a result of that. The Secretary of State says, yes, that's a valid address. You can be a registered voter. We have a lot more evolution to get through to get to a place where we can have those digital services. However, we have C-Click Fix for the DPW, where you can submit a pothole request to be repaired right from your smartphone or the website. We have digital permits now, where as opposed to going to the building inspector's department and waiting to see when you can have that all online now. We have digital public records requests now. So we're slowly introducing tools that are an extension of what we do for everyone, but we're also making sure we're empowering our department leaders to offer solutions that I think a younger generation kind of expect automatically. And I think a great example of that is especially in our harbor master's office. We have a young guy, he's still in his 20s, but U.S. Coast Guard veteran, and he's very, very eager to showcase all that he can do within that role in terms of accountability, but also for like moorings. It's always like this big list for moorings. Everyone's always like, oh God, I want to get on that list. And he took a couple of moorings that he reclaimed from people who weren't paying their tickets, and he finally did something about it. And he put it on an app called Docwa. And Docwa is almost like an Uber for moorings. And so people are coming in from other communities, and they're like, wow, I haven't been to Gloucester as a recreational voter. I love this, I love that. And they're all through the app. We're getting revenue, we're getting feedback, we're getting content, we're getting insights. So, and we're showing people the best of our community in a whole new way that we haven't even begun to think about. So
very cool.
It's exciting. It's very exciting. But I also worry about how wide does that go out? Does every department leader have an app that they want as their own thing that I don't know about? So
you're gonna have 50 different brands and apps and things to manage.
You think I'm sweating now?
Man, it's gonna be fascinating to watch. I mean, like we were talking about, it's just so early in the evolution of all this, and you've got to just deal with all of it. I don't envy that role, man. That's I think thank you, but I sort of, I guess. Good luck.
The one thing that I really believe is unique about Cape Ann, though, especially as compared to other communities that I've worked in, is there's very much a local, do I know you, approach, which is to say, if we bring all the right stakeholders together as the trusted sources, as the brands, as the stakeholders, and they say, look, we're all working together to solve this problem, they're going to do it. We have a Republican state senator, a Democratic state representative, an independent mayor, and I call them the holy trinity of local government because they are the best example of how everyone should be working. It's not about your party. It's not about who you supposedly represent behind the scenes. It's about representing your people every day, working together to provide the best solutions that you can offer, both in the short term and the long, and communicating that message along the way to keep expectations in place, right? So that's leadership in my mind. And for me, I want to see more of that. I want to see more of people working together, talking to each other about their problems, talking about what's going on in the community, getting feedback, having healthy conversations, because I think there's a lot of unhealthy conversations. A lot of validation, by the way, because I think there's a lot of misinformation, which is a big part of where I feel like I have to spend time in the future talking about is correcting misinformation. And that's a strategy that is kind of new for me. So, I don't want to call it fake news, but there's a lot of word of mouth things that happen that is so beyond the truth, and it gets bigger and bigger until you actually have to address it. And then that becomes a teachable moment of, well, why did that word of mouth thing become an actual headline that I now have to address? How the heck did that happen? Just because Jimmy down the way heard it from a seagull doesn't mean I should respond to it, right? So, but sometimes you do, and you have to take that seriously. I have to learn, that balance, but that's the local approach when you have that local authenticity, So again, I see it as exciting because it's a pioneering time, and that means you have a unique opportunity to provide leadership that you wouldn't otherwise. So, and again, maybe I'm a little arrogant to suggest that it's like my generation is that unique and special, but I really believe that. I really believe that we can be that bridge between all of the generations that can best celebrate how to work with one another in a way that we don't talk about what divides us. We talk about how we work together, and we get some remarkable things done. And that's what I really want to focus on. I sure know that's what the mayor wants to get done. She wants to have a Gloucester that represents everybody. So I know I'm eager to realize that on her behalf, working in tandem with her and her department leaders, and we have a great team there who are going to continue to get stuff done. So.
Well, Chris, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. There's a reason why you are my inaugural guest here, and I think you should probably be a regular guest because I'm fascinated to track what you guys are up to. It'll be really interesting to see how social and those sorts of things come into play with the next election.
Yeah, agreed.
And so, we should make this a standing quarterly conversation.
It's my honor to be here. Thank you again for the invitation, especially to be among your first guests.
The first.
The very first.
Yeah, the very first.
Again, thank you. Very honored. And again, it's really important to have these kinds of conversations. And I thank you and your entire team because this is good stuff, and it's only going to get better, I think. So
yeah, glad to hear it.
I'm here anytime. So
well, I appreciate that.
I'll just keep talking. So
and we'll fix this air conditioning problem. All right. Well, we'll sign off on our first podcast, and you'll be hearing from us again very soon. And please give us a 5-star rating if you like us, because that's the best way to position us on iTunes. Right, Jim?
That's right.
That's right. All right. Thanks, Chris.
thank you.
All right.